everyone, and welcome to Teaching Natural. My name's Dare. I'm a 6th-year high school English teacher in SoCal or Southern California. And this is the 4th video in my professional development series. The book we're focusing on this one is Book Love by Penny Kittle. Kittle is a high school English teacher who really focuses on building a love of reading. And so in this book, she is specifically focusing on building a love of independent reading and student choice and student agency in what they're reading, bringing that into the classroom and also making it part of meaningful curriculum. She taught on a block schedule where she would see her students for, I believe it was 2 hours every other day. And so that was kind of the case study in which she talks about her experience teaching reading and getting her students to enjoy reading and to become readers on their own. Let's talk about why I chose this book. So I talked about in I Read It, But I Don't Get It, how my students on our evaluative testing scored into the 5th grade level on average. And so my 9th grade PLC team was trying to figure out how do we improve these reading scores and how do we help our students, because these standards aren't lowered after the pandemic. We have to figure out how to build them at least getting close to that grade level on testing so that the learning loss or the limited growth in reading is not exacerbated throughout their lifetime. And so my PLC lead picked the book and we read it as a book study throughout the year so that this coming school year, we would be able to have a stronger 9th grade foundation of independent reading, and that hopefully when we build the strong foundations, all the other grade levels will see the improvement and will be able to build in a culture of independent reading where 9th grade has already done most of the work. So let's get to the book summary. The first thing that really stood out to me in the way that Kittle begins her book is she asked colleagues of her as well as friends who are professors, what is the expectation of reading for a freshman in college? And she looks at data of how many freshmen enter college and drop out. I'll put that graph right here. And so after talking to the professors, it varied from 200 pages to 600 pages a week that were expected of freshman college students. Averages out to 400 pages a week. And Kittle realized her students were nowhere near that level of reading stamina. And so how was she going to get them there? She decided to do that by building in independent reading into her regular week to help build students to that goal of an average of 400 pages a week. But she didn't just build the goal in, she told her students, this is the expectation that college professors have set, and we got to get you there. So here we go. While college professors had the expectation that a freshman would be able to read an average of 400 pages a week, Kittle noticed that one, her students knew how to fake read. They knew how to skim and scan, or they knew what their teachers were going to ask, or they knew how to use Spark Notes or just flip the page every minute. They knew how to get around reading because they didn't find the reading valuable, namely because they weren't reading what they wanted to read. And they also didn't understand the importance of reading. They didn't understand how valuable it would be. She also noticed that the staff at her own school were not avid, lifelong readers. They would read for a professional development, or they would read if they needed to fake read for their master's classes or things like that. But they themselves did not inherently have the love of reading that she assumed a teacher would have because they became a teacher. And so with that requirement of the college expectation and with noticing that people were losing the love of reading somewhere in secondary, she wanted to focus on bringing back the love of reading. And of course, she had to find a way to assess if students were reading, and we'll get there. But she really just wanted to bring back the joy of reading. The first thing that she kind of talks about after the average pages expected is how to help students calculate their reading goal. And it's not scientific in that it's not like this is a research-based formula, but it is a formula that kind of helped her get started. And when we talk about application in the classroom, I will talk about how I apply that. So here's the formula. She wants her students to read 2 hours a week, okay? So she has them read in class 10 minutes. They see how many pages they get to. They multiply how many pages they got to in 10 minutes by 12. 12 times 10 is 120, so that's 120 minutes, 2 hours. That gives them the page goal for how many pages they should be able to read in 1 week. She then multiplies that by however many weeks are in the semester, or if you're on block schedule, however many weeks are in the block schedule. That then gives them their semester pages goal. She then goes a step further and says that, okay, if an average book is about 200 pages, divide your semester goal by 200. There is how many books you should be able to read in a semester. Now, Kittle makes it clear that this formula, one, is not one size fit all, but she also tells her students that one, some books are going to have more than 200 pages. Some books might have less. Some books are going to be harder and therefore are going to take you longer to read. So the semester goal is not something that is, set in stone, but it's something to work towards. And by setting this goal and by building in time in the classroom in the day for them to read, they should be able to get somewhere close or just read more than they had been reading before they came to her. She keeps track of our students actually reading the way she assesses them by having book conversations with them where she asks them, are you reading for stamina, meaning it's a book that's a bit harder, or are you reading for confidence, meaning that it's a book that's easier, but they are building up their fluency. They are building up, hey, you are a reader, you can be a lifelong reader, keep reading sort of books. She has different kind of conversations for if a student is struggling, they don't understand what's going on in the book. If a student needed help looking at character versus plot versus theme, she has different kinds of conferences with the questions that she asks students in the book. And she talks about the students that she has the conference with, so you can see kind of the back and forth of the conversations. Another way that she assesses it is by keeping a running tab where students write in how many pages they've read, and then by the end, she totals up their pages, and then they'll know, one, if they met the goal, but then she'll be able to say, oh, as a class, we did X, Y, Z. She also has students write letters to her and do journal prompts based on their reading. So they are using their independent reading in writing assignments to improve their writing. She also uses those books as their mentor text for when she's working on grammar, when she's working on writing. She has students kind of mimic the author to see what it's like to write in that style. And that's one way that she also assesses them, is by then assessing their writing and what they're able to do with the book. The last thing that she talks about in her book is building a culture of reading. So as I had said earlier, she noticed that the staff members at her school did not read. So she had a great administrator who was so very supportive, and they were able to build in a whole school reading time. I think it was 20 minutes or 30 minutes, a whole school reading time where every single student and all of the staff members had books in their classroom or books in the gym or books in the counselor's office, if that's where the student was. They would all read for that amount of time, and then they would go on with the rest of their day. And so that is really incredible that she was able to kind of build that culture. She also has posters of students that say, I can't remember the name of the school, but the school reads, and then had students, various students with books open and the book that they were reading. And those posters went all around the school so that there was an image of students themselves reading, not just random stock photo of somebody reading. The last thing I want to talk about in the book summary is that Kittle organizes her classroom library by doors. For example, a door of life and death. And so all of the books in that door have something to do with an author having a question about life or death, or something that might help a student kind of come to terms with this bigger theme. Another door that she talks about is the door of courage. So instead of alphabetizing her library, she just found it easier to do it by themes. Now that I've kind of given an overview of some of the key points in the book, let's go on to how I'm going to apply this in my classroom this year. I found it easiest for this section to talk about what I already do plus what I already do and then the changes that I'm going to make. So something I already did is I already had 10 minutes of independent reading twice a week. That was the most I could do because my class periods are 50 minutes. So anything more than that starts to eat into the other things that I need to do in the curriculum. And so while independent reading is valuable, as a teacher, we all know there are other things we have to get through. As much as I would love to just sit and read our independent reading book for the whole day, there's that. But also I do 10 minutes because students have to build the stamina to be able to read. In the beginning of the semester, it is really hard for students to sit for 10 minutes and read a book. But easily, by doing this routine, they get into it, and when the timer goes off at the end of the 10 minutes, they'll be like, oh man. Or if unfortunately I have to cut reading because we have something that is going on with the schedule or something else we have to get to, students will always ask, oh, we're not reading today? And I'll have to say, unfortunately not. Okay, so I already build in time for independent reading. I was already using reading logs where students were tracking their pages, and I was already setting page goals with my students, but the goals were more kind of random. Students were just throwing out random numbers of like 30,000 books or 30,000 pages. Ooh, 30,000 books would have been a lot. But like, oh, we can read 30,000 pages in this semester. We could read 15,000 pages in this semester. So the goal was not as focused. Something else I already did was book of the month recommendations. And with book of the month recommendations, it was easy to tie in those cultural heritage months where that shouldn't be the only time you talk about that culture, but you can highlight a book that is told from the perspectives of that culture during that time with book of the month. I'm pretty sure I forgot to mention in the book summary that Kittle would talk about book talks where she would read a small section of a book and talk about that book and have it available for students to be able to read. So there's that. The last thing is I already had my classroom library organized by interest area or by genre. I organized it by teen drama / romance, classical fiction, adventure, sci-fi, horror, and then biography / nonfiction. I already had that kind of organized there, and I find that that's much easier and much better than trying to alphabetize or trying to have too many categories to where students get overwhelmed. So those are the things I already did. Here are the changes that I'm going to make. Number one, first thing I'm going to do is have my students fill out this form where we are going to set their reading goal using Kittle's formula. I will then write the collective page goal, adding up all of the pages from all of my classes and say like, okay, based on Kittle's formula, this is where we're going to try to hit for our page goal. And I think that's going to make the page goal more meaningful, but I think it'll also make some of the reading data more meaningful, hopefully with the state testing of their reading / district testing. I hope that'll make that data more physical for students than just random numbers, random percentage, or this is a random test we took at the beginning and the end of the year and it didn't really mean anything. I'm going to use book conferences as a way to grade reading because I don't always just want them to be taking a comprehension test. I do want them to be able to talk to me about what they're reading with their book, and then that'll also help me differentiate by asking them questions based on specifically what they are struggling with their book, rather than kind of waiting until we read the whole thing and me kind of guessing where they might be. I can see, oh, this is a specific standard that you're struggling with. Let's talk about it one-on-one with your book. So that is something I'm going to do to assess reading this year. Another change. I am going to more intentionally talk about books. I'm going to try to do some book talks. I can't do them once a week like Kittle does, but I can probably get in one a month. And even if that is just talking about my book of the month recommendation for students, just reading a small passage from it and then saying, okay, if you're interested in this book, the book of the month, it'll be right back there. If somebody checks it out, you can go down to our school library and check it out. And then the next thing that I'm going to do, kind of like the last change I'm going to make to how I do independent reading, is going to be using the independent reading book as models for sentences, as models for breaking down reading comprehension and where students get stuck. That way, one, I don't have to create all of these resources, but also that way I'm doing more reading, writing, and grammar instruction in context with a book that is meaningful to them, rather than kind of these random sentences or random books that they don't really have buy-in to. In my final thoughts, this book is a bit more theoretical in that so much of what Kittle is able to do is because she does have that 2-hour block schedule with them. And so a lot of the things that she's able to do realistically, I just won't be able to do in 50 minutes. And I don't think a lot of teachers will be able to do. So Kittle's book does take on a more theoretical approach than here's exactly how you do it, here's exactly how you apply it, there you go. So that was Book Love by Penny Kittle. I hope my talking about it sparked something in you or resonated with you, something that you might want to try in your classroom, or that it interested you in the book. If you got the book and you read it, let me know what is something that resonated with you, something that you'll take with, what were your opinions on the book. Or if you didn't get the book and you are now interested in reading the book, what was something that made you interested in reading the book? In the meantime and in between time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.